Aliens of London by Joseph Lidster is one of 3 new Doctor Who novelisations that we received at the end of March 2026, and it was probably the one I was most excited to read. Most people probably would have said The Satan Pit by Matt Jones, obviously returning to novelise his own story. But for me, it was definitely this one. I think coming off of having just read 6 Ninth Doctor new series adventures as well, I still felt like I was somewhat in a Ninth Doctor mood. And personally, I do kind of prefer the iconicness of the Slitheen, and Aliens of London and World War III are great. Harriet Jones is great. All that kind of stuff on Earth is phenomenal. And Joseph Lidster has done a great job here. If you're not familiar with Joseph Lidster, he's been active within the Doctor Who world since the early noughties, beginning with Big Finish audio stories like Terra Firma and Master, as well as short stories in their short story collection books throughout most of the noughties as well. But he would go on to write tie-in material for the Doctor Who website for the revival of the show, as well as episodes for Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures. So he wrote the Torchwood Series 2 episode A Day in the Death, as well as 3 Sarah Jane Adventures episodes across 3 series, being The Madwoman in the Attic, The Nightmare Man, and The Mark of the Berserker. Since then, his involvement with Doctor Who has been more minimal, but notably he returned in 2023 to pen the first story in the Big Finish audio series Rani Takes on the World. This is, however, more or less his first long-form novel, although he did technically novelise his Sarah Jane Adventures story The Nightmare Man in 2010, but then that was only released on ebook and of course tailored to a younger audience. Of course as well, this story was originally written by Russell T Davies, who for obvious reasons didn't novelise this, so they brought on Joseph Lidster to do this. My experience with them getting writers to cover for the original writer has been hit or miss. You know, Jenny Colgan, from what I remember, did a really good job with the Christmas Invasion, so I'm looking forward to reading The Time of Angels. But Paul Cornell, who wrote Twice Upon a Time, that one wasn't my favourite. I've done reviews of both of those, so feel free to check those out. The book itself opens with 4 different moments from different parts of the story. You've got the Doctor running through the hospital to get the pig. You've got the pig being taken from the farm. You've got Rose on her own as a kid in her bedroom, and you've got Jackie on her own as an adult waiting for Rose to come home. Not sure exactly why it started with this, but it is nice. This is something that happens multiple times throughout the book, revisiting characters at important moments throughout the story. It's nothing special, but it does help the reader see the importance of these key moments on each of the people involved. But once we get into it, off the bat, Joseph Lidster gets it right. He doesn't rely on dialogue. He inputs character moments where he feels it's necessary. He creates this new world that he feels works for this story and feels very specific to the way that he writes. You know, he's not relying on Russell T Davies. He's not relying on the dialogue and the action that happened within these 2 episodes. He's making it his own. Little tidbits and character thoughts and new moments just sprinkled in throughout this novelization, and you can definitely see a focus on characters. But whilst it was nice to see these moments throughout the book, I did feel like it was inundated with them, especially at the beginning. I felt like he was trying to make it clear that this is like, you know, its own thing. It's a novelization. It's not the original thing. Look at all these cool new things. It wasn't so obvious towards the end, but at the beginning you have obviously all of these extra bits to kind of entice you into reading it, of course. And it, again, like whilst I said it was nice to see and I enjoyed these moments, it felt like there was a lot of these tiny bits and pieces. So many character names just being rattled off: Molly Steer, Adelaide Charles, Janet Parnell, Danny, Mrs. Boufakis, Brian, Brainy Betty, Beryl Thompson, Sandra and Jason. Of course, a lot of these people just kind of friends of Jackie. But then you also have a lot of known, like, familiar characters of the story already getting names such as the policeman PC Tristan White, Barry the pig, cruelly taken from his farm, or a pretty random exploration of Oliver Charles, the Slitheen that eventually takes over General Asquith. Just kind of a couple pages on him and his life as Oliver Charles, this kind of man who has a wife, a mistress, and a young farmer. Like, it was very unnecessary. It was just a throwaway line kind of in the episode, and I'm not saying it wasn't interesting to just kind of have a little tidbit about that, but like I said, there was a lot of these kind of extra tiny moments. There was even some additions to the news presenters. Tom Hitchinson gets a little bit of backstory, and Trinity Wells gets a few kind of character moments as well. No character is left unturned. It did feel a little bit all over the place at times, and probably hindered the novel at certain points when it came to the pacing, especially in the Aliens of London first half of the novel. But there were also quite neatly included references such as a cameo from President Winters, and a mention of Major Blake, and of course more look at Tosh's involvement. Of course, the actress who played Tosh appeared as Dr. Sato in this episode before being cast as Tosh in Torchwood, and they kind of later on canonized her actual involvement as being the same character covering for Owen, and it was nice to see some more canonizing of that in this novel, so that was quite nice. Speaking of canonizing, it also canonizes a 90s Doctor Who magazine character in Muriel Frost. She also appeared in The Fires of Vulcan, a Big Finish audio story by Steve Lyons. And just from all of this, you can clearly tell that this story is written by someone who just loves Doctor Who. Someone who is very knowledgeable in Doctor Who lore, but understanding the importance of not letting it overwhelm the story. Like I said, despite all of these major and minor changes, you can clearly see that Joseph Lidster enjoyed novelizing this story, and he's clearly you can tell that this is written by someone who cares a lot about Doctor Who. Joseph Lidster approached this story exactly how I would expect someone should approach a novelization, not relying on clipped scenes and dialogue, and making it his own, incorporating fresh perspectives and character moments. This might be quite nitpicky, but I maybe would have preferred some of these character moments to instead focus on the kind of physical descriptions of these characters. You have the episode in the back of your mind to help you with these descriptions, but maybe if you haven't seen the episode in a while, you don't want to just watch it again to have to read this novelization. You want to still be able to read this novelization and get these character descriptions, make up some new imagery about these characters, and let it take you from there instead of having to rely on like seeing the episode in front of you. So to have some physical descriptions would have been great, especially for the Slitheen. They're still kind of in the episode themselves are obviously quite similar, but the novelization would have allowed you to introduce some physical differences, or even like personality differences in a lot of these characters. They're just kind of all Slitheen and they want to hunt, blah blah blah. There was this, again, quite small moment with Margaret, or Blonde, where it's said that she's like the youngest of the family, and she's kind of a little bit pushed off to the side, and I would have loved to see more of that, explore the Slitheen and their intentions, and again, like, you could incorporate some more physical kind of differences, scars or whatnot from past interactions and kind of fights and hunts that they've been in. Of course, they're quite clean in the episode. They could have been a little bit more gruff, I suppose. I can't think of a better word. This is why I'm not a writer. But like I said, it's difficult not to just enjoy these fun tangents and little moments. And Joseph Lidster clearly knew what he wanted to gloss over and what he wanted to focus on, what he wanted to kind of add little details to. And that's clearly the way that he wanted to go about this novelization. And I really, really enjoy it because of that fact. It's a fresh new take compared to some of the other novels that I've reviewed that rely so heavily on what's previously been, what they've previously written. A lot of these novelizations are written by the original writers, and they kind of, for some reason, don't explore their own work even more. Of course, perhaps they think it's kind of as good as it can be, but when you get someone else to write it, they obviously have different perspectives. Sometimes that doesn't go very well, but here that's kind of to the benefit of this story. So I really appreciate Joseph Lidster kind of putting his own spin on it. It's really exciting having these 3 new novelizations. We haven't had novelizations of previous Doctor Who stories since 2023. We've only had like concurrent Doctor Who stories novelized since then of Ncuti Gatwa's seasons. So it's really nice to return to some older stories, and I'm really excited to read the other 2, which I haven't gotten around to as at time of filming. But I will be giving Aliens of London by Joseph Lidster a 7.5 out of 10. Obviously, if you've read this book already, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I'll probably be looking to make a video about whether these books are worth your money, basically, because they are, getting more and more expensive by the day. Not the books themselves, but just books in general. So yeah, I'll be really interested to hear what everyone thinks about this story. I rewatched the episode whilst reading this novelization, both episodes, and yeah, it's such a time capsule of 2005, but it's iconic. You didn't need massive effects back then to be kind of believable, big rubber suits and miniature sets and stuff like that. It was great. And I think this novelization kind of gets that down. It's just a kind of personal opinion that it didn't get kind of maybe a higher score, but I could definitely see why someone would really like this novelization. I just gave it a little bit lower because of all the kind of tidbits and stuff that overwhelmed me a little bit. So I was just quite pedantic or petty, I suppose, with some of these little points. But in terms of like the broader novelization landscape, this is one of the strongest novelizations that I've read. So thank you very much for joining me with this one, and I will see you in the review of The Satan Pit by Matt Jones.